There will be 12 artists matched with 12 families. Each artist family team will produce an artwork that tells the family story.
I'm the true believer of why make it simple when it can be really, really complicated. So we're on the way.
Parts of the project are complicated, but for us it's going to be fairly simple. We simply have to be unafraid. We simply have to trust one another. We simply have to work with each other, share our stories.
I approach writing like a therapist. I thought about my readers in terms of respect, in terms of what are the conditions we need to create in order to make transformation possible. And I have as you might not be surprised here, I have very strong opinions about that. But essentially, my opinions boil down to a few simple statements. Virtually everything vile that happens on this planet happens because of dehumanization, objectification, creating an other who isn't real, and everything good that happens between people on this planet comes from seeing people as they truly are and understanding the world from their point of view. Now, I think what this project does, or could do, is something extremely important, because you could go into the home of someone you've never met with the goal, I want to understand your experience. Gloria Steinem said, empathy is the most radical of emotions. And from my point of view, the way we'll evaluate this project is how much more empathy have we created in this community for a diverse population. And it's the measure of each of your individual projects, and it's the measure of the worth of the entire project.
And I want everybody to know that we will tonight create some kind of a common denominator with this group. Each one of you have a personality, but this group has a personality. And I really want you to acknowledge that as well. And so tonight, what I thought that would be important was for the families to come in a circle, in an inner circle, and express and ask questions about the process, the general process of what this whole thing is going to be like. Outside of the circle, the artist will be listening. Not saying a word, but listening to what the families are saying. And then we reverse later on today that circle.
I remember I was brought into a New York orphanage when I was a day old by a Russian mother. Didn't know that till I was 27.
Helped take care of us, and my father, because she died so young and so unexpectedly, were very shattered, and they didn't function very well. And so my sister and I kind of just limped through the remainder of our childhood, but for my sister that was very difficult because she turned 3 2 days after my mother passed. And so there's that saying that says that, you know, that which doesn't destroy you makes you stronger. And I think that in some way that those hard times prepared me for when I started to come of age and realize that I was a lesbian. And I realized that when I was 16, but
it was set in clinic. I don't know how much you are familiar with this Bosnian War, but you know, when you have war in your country, you have to go out or you will be killed. And fighting and killing. It was part of everyday life over there. And then we decided to play in Croatia for 2 years. I was in refugee camp. My husband, he was in concentration camp. And he survived terrible things. And I believe that God saved him because I love him.
She has raised 12 children, 7 daughters and 5 sons, and has been widowed for the past 32 years, has lived independently all that time, and she is truly a very strong lady, very, very religious, very devout lady. I say that she has the strength of 1,000 angels because she is just always very positive and
We tried to teach our children that they would never stand up to authority figures if they didn't learn to stand up to us. And so they stand up to us. Since the death of my husband, they are my severest critic.
I drug her along to keep me company because my husband and son are in Iraq right now, so. And so that would be a lot of my story because I'm retired military and my husband and my son are both in the Army, and so that's a real hardship that we're facing in our life. I know you've had listened to you and your
My
hardship.
grandmother isn't here, and she's a major part of this project too. I was the one asked to represent our family, but I needed to bring my grandmother in because me and my brothers all together are 7 of us, and my grandmother raised us all at one time or another, and she's kept the family together. We've all went through a lot of changes and culture shock. Coming to Lincoln from the reservation's a culture shock, and a lot of my tribe is from South Dakota, and we're all right on the border of Nebraska. And
as a different type of family coming together, we have life before tornado, life at the tornado, and immediately after, and now we have life after. How are we going to make that easy for our particular artists? Because that encompasses so much, and then you look at the different layers of life that occur in each of those time frames.
If I was asked to illustrate this, just say pen and ink or color, how would I make it look? Well, again, there's so many stories. There's no one right way to put this. You could come up with like 1 million different paintings, and each one tells the story at a point in time kind of thing.
There's a kind of a documentary that and at the same time, or an epic story.
Yeah.
At the same time, we have to get it down to a haiku.
There were times, all you could say are foul things or cry, but for us, that first day we did our crying here, and after we went and walked around, we knew we were very fortunate. There were so many people who had nothing left, and that was bare bones, nothing. You can pick through the rubble and find things and clean them up and take them, but we had virtually everything. We didn't lose a whole lot. And so, when someone would come by and say, well, how did you guys rape? I don't know.
Lucky.
I don't know. The vulnerability that each of us then, I don't know if you'd say are exposed to, but your exposure of vulnerability is out there. It didn't matter. I know this morning he said, what, you don't have your hair curled or something else happening? And that didn't become important anymore. There was a much more meaningful focus about what's important. That's it. Not a pretty option. Tried to keep it as low-key as possible versus something too crazy. And this year,
It wasn't like you think of a tornado as a funnel. It was a
2-mile wall cloud
2.5
that just sat
mile.
on the town, and they basically said as they were tracking it, it was moving along, then it just stopped here and pummeled the town, and then it moved on. It stopped here for like a good 15 minutes, and there were funnels inside this whole thing that just, they said it was like waving a string back and forth.
Wow.
And then this is my grandfather when he enlisted in the Army for World War I. And it was, he was 17. He lied about his age so he could serve his country. And then this is my son Jonathan. He's the one overseas in Iraq with my husband Chad. Here he took a picture of himself in the mirror to wave at me. And he is wearing those Army, what they call birth control glasses, because they're not very stylish. So I've got a better picture of them in here as we go down. This is how they store their water in big bladders.
Wow.
There at Al-Assad. What do you got planned for tomorrow? What'd you do today? Can you share just a typical day, just real quick?
Well, I start off every day but Sunday with a staff meeting at 7 in the morning. Then Saturday we have we call it a formation with our whole unit, just to pass out information.
I've never been to a studio before, so everything amazes me.
Okay, this is what's called a composing stick.
Okay.
And you make it, make the lines however long you want. Have little pieces of lead in between to make spaces. And then you put each letter down there.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, Mohammed's farm used to be like this before Saddam, when they gave an order to cut all the trees out. Now it's like this, the land. It's very sad. 1,000 trees, they cut them in one day. That's only date trees, not
In
the
one
others.
day. Okay.
Yeah, it's like this now. It's very sad. Yeah. Oh, he's here. Not really.
Okay. That old flag from the before communist come over. That freedom
The old flag.
The old,
Actually, it's recognized in the city of Lincoln because I think the mayor said this will be the official Vietnam flag, not the communist one. It represents before the communists took over.
That's a freedom.
It's the freedom flag.
Yeah, freedom flag.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. If they see the communist flag, people will not be happy at all.
Oh, no.
They tear down.
Yeah, they've had riots in California when they would show like the communist flag.
That's the book. That's the book what I'm talking about. I discovered that the Croatian and Serbian people, they are Slav too. You will find in this book roots of the Bosnian people.
So this is one that you'd recommend
Yes,
that I start out
yes,
with?
yes.
Okay.
And you will
All right.
see truth, history, always have some conflict.
I was in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago, and I saw a magnificent exhibition of the Ottoman Empire, and it was really quite fabulous. So I've been looking at pictures to see if I see any influence of those opulent
We do
fabrics.
have food.
Food too?
Sometimes food, baklava, I don't know what they left, and Greek baklava too. Yeah, he has.
Oh, he has one, yes.
Okay. What would you like to drink? I do have some beer.
This is my baby picture.
We could have bookends of those.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You look like a porcelain doll. You do. Look at this picture. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just had to have been like hand colored or something because it really.
It's an illustration from a magazine.
Yeah.
This is us at a New Year's Eve party at a gay country western bar in Omaha, Nebraska a number of years ago.
Say that again.
I became a vegan a little over 4 years ago.
How does vegan differ from regular vegetarian?
I don't use any animal products. No dairy or eggs or beef.
Which is kind of funny because didn't you were showing cattle in
I didn't want
grade
to.
school? Yeah.
No. That was just because I grew up in a cattle-loving family.
Then you got the real typed manuscripts.
Oh, that's the one I wrote when I was 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this one, and there's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
I was older when I wrote some of those others.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of mine.
Published.
Self-published.
Well, it's in a real book cover.
Yes, it looks pretty good.
Oh, and the hometown articles to go with it.
Yeah.
Local writer makes good. Oops. What year was that?
One of the things that I wanted to do, and I don't want to invade your privacy by any means. You've been saying lots of beliefs that you have, but I wanted to know what about this project was interesting to you.
It just seemed kind of flattering that my family would be eligible to, have a piece of artwork made. We get to actually see how someone from the outside would see us.
Yeah, that just from talking to your grandmother, and also from you, but I've noticed that that your culture and religion have a strong impact on how you do things and how just who you are and the things that you've done. For example, I asked her where she considered home, and without a doubt she said, Pine Ridge was where she considered home.
I have two worlds that I live in. I live in the American world, and I live in Lakota, my nation's world. I love my culture, and I feel blessed to be in it, even though, we went through so much. My reservation, Pine Ridge, is actually the poorest reservation in the nation. And the reason I think that is because we gave the government the most problems. Crazy Horse, he killed Custer, and the Black Hills was part of my tribe's land. And I think because of all this, we were persecuted the worst, and so it's been the hardest for us to rebuild just because we hadn't had the resources or the ability. Our religion was, I don't know the right word for it, when they tried to abolish it, when they tried to basically kill it. They tried to kill our culture off, and so there was a lot of, there was a lot of torture and kidnap and just real brutal discipline to try to, civilize Indians. And they believed that they were actually helping us by teaching us.
I know the choice for him to leave Sudan. It is a difficult choice I had ever had in my life, because when we decided to leave, because if he didn't leave, he would be killed. When the Sudanese government realized that he joined the rebels, so they make a lot of trouble for me, even in my work. They make my own student to be spy on me.
I was afraid to lose my children. I know she'd be subjected to harassment from the government and the security of people in Sudan.
They destroy my house. I come from the work. I find all my house knocked down and all my kids sitting on the sun.
I wondered what will become of my children. But I prayed that they wouldn't lose. She wouldn't lose them.
I didn't know anything about him 7 years after he gone. He said that he sent letter for me, but I didn't receive any letter for him. He know that we are here, but I don't know if he is alive or dead. I don't know. but my heart tell me that he is there. This woman in this picture, she lose one of her part, but she is still doing all her duty in her life. She bring the water and take care of her kids. Butterfly, for me, it mean a lot. My father have a big garden. He used to work there. I always be with him there. All the time I focus on looking around for the butterflies. They are beautiful. I am excited about their color. I cannot imagine there is someone can create a picture with coordinated color like a butterfly. So I love God in that time. I think, oh, God is great. He drew this picture.
Did you feel a little bit betrayed by God at any point during that struggle that you had?
I never lost my trust in God. Every single trouble I get through it, because God loved me. He tested me to see how strong I was. So every time I have more trustful in my God.
I was not going to be a homemaker, of course. I was going to be a famous newspaper woman. And so I didn't like to cook. I didn't like to do any of the domestic things. And she would get home so late, and I would get home so late, and all I would do was eat and usually just go right to bed. I didn't even wash the dishes, because I had to get to bed, because I'd have to get up at 4 and 5 to get out on that dusty road and try to catch a ride into town to get to school. And my husband actually taught me how to cook. I think I told you that he wanted to be a dietitian, and so when I met him, he knew how to cook. In fact, he and my mother, one time when she visited us, got into a big squabble about whether to put baking powder or soda in cornbread. And of course, nobody could tell my mother what to do, and nobody could tell my husband what to do. And so they really had a big argument. And in fact, I think my mother ended up swearing because she was so outdone that he would try to tell her how to make cornbread.
My worst experience in vaudeville was when I first got into New York. I got hired for this dance team, beautiful dance team that had an alto, contralto, and a soprano, which was me, for one day, because we had to stand on we were supposed to be the candlesticks. We were the candles, you know, and we were standing on a high thing about this high. I had to get up a ladder to get up to it, and about this big square. The orchestra was in the pit. I couldn't see the director, yet I was supposed to start singing. I couldn't hear the music. Where was I supposed to start? And at least I was looking for this downbeat. None. Couldn't see any of it. So, of course, I didn't start when the dancers were ready to dance. I got fired as fast as I got hired.
So I've been trying to think of the one thing that links your family together. It might not be language, It's certainly not location. But last time you talked about the importance of your recipes that you've passed on.
¿Tiene algunas ideas?
Bueno, hay diferentes formas, como si le damos una receta, también le podemos demostrar cómo se cocina esa receta.
So that they can give you the recipe or they can show you how to make them. You can have like a tamale day.
Excellent.
That would be fun.
Yes. That's what this is called, pelote?
Yeah.
Rodadillo,
Yeah.
Sí.
This horse is very symbolic of this Stories of Home project, because as I was gathering materials, I couldn't do anything with them. I just had them. So I think this horse, this stallion, this red stallion, was me, you know, chomping at the bit, wanting to get going, and so I painted this horse. I got this soapstone, and I thought, okay, I'll try carving, and and I found out that stones break easy. But anyway, so I got the sculptor's tools, the chisel and the hammer. So that's symbolic that I'm doing a sculpture. But I'm actually calling this an installation. I mean, I always gather materials, and my daughter had put the ribbons on the netting, and I thought, whoa, the yellow ribbon represents the bring the soldiers home. It's a pretty devastating thing to have your family just be gone for a year and know that they're not going to be there. And so she is the rock of the family, and Chad said that too, that having her here makes it easier for him to be there. I want him to think. There's a lot of serious things in a lot of my funny paintings, and I want him to, you know, wonder, what is this? What is this? Why did she do that? And what does it mean? And then either get a laugh about it, or get serious and do some serious thinking about the whole situation.
Our education is incomplete. I think that very well-meaning parents raise their children to believe in equality and justice without ever teaching children about injustice and inequality. And on the day of the March on Washington, she was testifying before a grand jury in Kansas City, and she was not able to march with her husband, who marched in Washington on that day. What I'd like to show in this piece is how the fight for civil rights continues today, and we perhaps have not made the progress that certainly the Shanks family had hoped to make when they were speaking out in 1963. So what you'll see in the video that plays on this is you'll see video of the march, and the marchers continue to march and march and march. And then superimposed over the marchers on plexi that's over the screen are the words "all deliberate speed." And that refers to the language used in the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus the Board of Education. it's an incredible honor to work with her.
Yeah, I mean, on some sides, each of them are hanging on, and each of them are sort of pulling away. That's interesting to me. I feel like that's in every relationship. And that's sort of a reference to those early Renaissance religious paintings, just heavily laden with symbolic gesture, because it was sort of right on the cusp of when they learned about contrapposto. So all the information that was being portrayed was done through the hands and the faces. So they had this whole language of hand gestures, you know, these blessings, and I'm interested in that. What does that mean? Because we don't know if you hold 2 fingers up or the whole hand. I think each of those things has a different meaning, but that's not common knowledge. I've been looking at this sculpture of hair. I also wanted to keep her sort of in that Egyptian posture to some degree. I guess what I'm more interested in is starting to look at this long history and learning from it, and being able to learn so quickly about figurative sculpture that took, you know, centuries to learn as a human race. They're Muslim. They live in they're from the Nuba mountain region of Sudan, which is, the Nile comes down like this, and it's sort of in there, in that crook. The Nile's not near where they live, but that's where the region is, in Sudan. Sudan's the biggest country in Africa. It's a carved gourd, and this opens up and it's a mirror, and it has a saying in Arabic, something about looking in and seeing home. So I'm copying that onto here, and I'm going to place a photo of her family on the inside. Something it's interactive, but not really, but it still puts her children close to her heart. My biggest fear and nervousness with this project is I just want to do them justice. They're so beautiful, and I just hope that I can represent them in some way that feels good to them.
I mean, just entering somebody's home, I think, is so, it's a sacred place, and you just can't barge in and have a preconceived idea of somebody and how they live, and it just takes a long time. Little visits, little phone calls. Jan's big thing, I think her future, and from just getting to know her in the last few months, is all about eating healthy and the vegan, vegetarian. That's the most extreme style of vegetarianism. And her goal in life is the cheesecake business, vegan cheesecakes. So this is kind of like the shrine to the cheesecake. And I think a real interesting thing about Jan is she was raised in the country where they actually raised cattle, show cattle. So there are some pictures of her, I probably flagged them, of her showing these giant animals. Oh, I think there's a caption on the back of this one that her mom wrote saying, Jan looks sad because she found out we have to kill the cow. I asked her if that's why she was a vegetarian, and she said, no, I don't, it's not that I love animals that much, I actually don't like cows. They're kind of mean. So, and then there's a lot of she's got a complex family deal too, because she's got a birth mother and a birth father, and an adopted mother and father and brothers. And I think if Jan were going to write a mystery today, it would be the search for the look-alike aunt. She hasn't met this woman yet, and I think that's kind of an exciting thing. I think that might happen sometime soon. Her most recent poem, she's a writer and a poet, her most recent poem had a lot of references to being in a cage. And part of that is she spends a lot of time with her 2 little parakeets. And so there's kind of a human figure in there as a bird.
a little bird perch, and there'll probably be a little critter in there with her there. So somehow this is all going to have to be crammed in here and part of it pulled out and without falling apart before we're done. I have to find ways to hook this stuff up.
When was the last time you sat down for hours at a time with a 90-year-old woman just to chat? And you know, just for the sole purpose of picking her brain. And one day she just said, what do you want? What is it you want to know? Like, I think she could just tell I was sort of beating around the bushes a little bit. And I looked at Deanna, and Deanna asked her again, and at that point I knew, like, I could ask her anything. And so we started talking religion and politics. You know, I remember talking to her about her children and when they were, you know, moving back and forth a lot. And she's telling me this, and in her head it's all happening during the Dust Bowl. You know, like, I can't even fathom that. All I know about the Dust Bowl is what I read in a woman from Kansas. I read her diary of the Dust Bowl, and I realized, like, how hard it would be. And here I am talking to, you know, this woman who lived through it, who worked through it, whose family depended on her and her husband. And so this piece is about her having to pack her kitchen every time they traveled from farm to farm. And you know, she was telling me about this blue box that her husband made for her. And so I'm making her another blue box. The plan, and I'm hoping it all comes together the same way in my head, is that she will be listing the greatest thing she gave to each of her children, and her children will be listing the greatest thing that they received from their mother without having talked to one another. And I will etch them into these rolling pins that will then, as you make tortillas, and I think this is going to have all the makings for, or all the ingredients for tortillas stored in it. But as you roll tortillas on the top panel of it, they will print the words of what each has gotten from one another. You know, what the mother has given the children and what the children have received from the mother in terms of their lifetime's worth of learning. You know, my theory is, and I'm sure all of her children would agree, that she's passed a lot more than just her recipes. And I think hopefully this will help her to see that. I'm not sure what her thoughts on it are. I did try to explain the piece to her, and I'm wondering if she doesn't think I'm just weird. I mean, I like to think I'm pretty laid back as it is, but you know, I think she's like the queen of being laid back. You know, she's so mellow, like nothing would faze her. And I love that. You know, I aspire to that. You know, just to exist, just, you know, everything's even, everything's equal, everything's happening for a purpose in your life. I don't think I thought like that before, but I hope I can think like that in the future. Now I feel like I've got a hero to look up to.
I looked for things that were translatable, not too concerned about whether or not the viewer of the piece will be able to read them. And I think that's okay. When we look at art, there's much more than we could possibly gather from the piece. And so I think looking at a piece of art is just a point of departure. It's a time to reflect on our own background and then to start building background and gathering information. I will not try to hide the fact that this is a life and a culture that has been subjected to war, and war isn't pretty. That doesn't mean that I'm going to make an effort to make parts of it ugly, but I am going to be using some materials that suggest war. Out of the ashes of war come wonderful things. It's a terrible price to pay for them, but they do emerge. It's like when a forest burns down, eventually plant life will begin to show up, something like winter. when that's over, we begin to see the new growth peeping through. She's had a life of despair, but then there's these hopeful things, and there's a glee when she's talking about her sons and the education they're getting and the opportunity that they have. Those are equivalent to new plant life. It's this that I want to show you. I think it's quite beautiful, and it's very much a metaphor for this piece because there's a lot of entanglement here. There's a lot of disorder, although I think it's disorder it's not hideous. I think it's disorder that just hasn't been ordered, but it has potential. And I think that that's the state of Maida's life right now. I think it's the state of Bosnia, that they're trying, they're ordering, they're reconsidering their resources to determine what direction to go.
It is quite the puzzle, because not only am I making a physical piece, but I'm dealing with so many different audience demands. I've got the Lincoln Arts Council with its expectations. I'm representing Zainab's story, and I don't yet know. I've told her what I'm doing, but she has not actually seen this piece. I don't know how she'll feel about the condensation of it and the choices that I've made. Zainab's family would have had the money to go on this truck, but her father's pocket had been picked, so he didn't have the cash. A woman who Zainab speaks of with just tremendous respect, she told them this woman had already paid her money, and she came to Zainab's family and to all the other people who had not been able to pay and said that she would distract the driver. She would go and talk to him, and when he turned his head, she wanted everybody up on that truck. And Zainab said it was like a miracle. The woman talked to the driver, and when the driver turned around again, he couldn't tell who had paid and who hadn't. The man had so many people in his truck and so much furniture that people would find that something was poking them in the back or something uncomfortable, and they would just pitch it out. The man lost quite a bit of his furniture on that trip. I usually don't do these upside down.
I was sitting on this and the whole time. And it was like this, exactly like that. Okay, yeah, it was the bike was right over here, like right here. Because when we sat, we had to hold to the end here, to the edge, so we don't, because it was really full. So if we can put something in the bottom, if you can't cut it to make it smaller, and then we can put something, and then raise all the furniture to make it exactly how it was,
We shouldn't put all the furniture in because people need to see that there's writing on the bottom. Because that's part of your story.
Okay.
I started with, this isn't, the stain is gone, one brave lady, and I started the story here, and then I finish it there.
Okay, sorry.
So, by this stage, I think that people have already thrown out some of the furniture.
Okay.
He doesn't have much left, but we can put more in than this.
And we can arrange it.
Their lifestyle is in some ways foreign to me. Just going to all these political events, I'm pretty introverted, and I spend time in my studio and I teach classes, and I don't know, I don't really go to very many functions ever. They're very public figures, both Lynn and Barb. They have a very public life. But I think that there's the side of them that is just trying, it's like they just want to have their family, and they just want to keep going, and they just want to go from one day to the next. I don't know. I guess it's kind of stripping it down into like what their family is. Like this is like the bare bones of it. Two 2 parents and a child. I don't know. So, I mean, it's in some ways you can look at it and just say it's just feet. I had no idea how they'd react. It's like, here I come. Take off your socks and shoes, and will you let me take pictures of your feet? They take us around everywhere. You know, it's what we stand on. It's what grounds us. It's what takes us from one place to another.
My sculpture that is a metaphor in part for the story of Hallam is the landmark of the tree. This is a photograph of Hallam actually probably 10 years before the event, but it demonstrates all of the trees that were in existence. I did a lot of still life, or a lot of still photography of all of the trees within Hallam. This is one that inspired me to work with one stump that varied off of something I found there. But there are literally at least 50 trees that I've photographed that show various amputations of limbs or literally sawed off, and yet show signs of rejuvenation. They're starting to grow back in one form or another. This is terracotta, and so it's clay. It's a very thin wall clay, so it has to be worked with a certain urgency. At least in my case, I worked with it in building a coil-like method and working it up, and had the assistance of a colleague in doing so that I could work rapidly. The sculpture itself has acoustical values inside of it, and so the soundtrack provides kind of an environmental aspect or an installation aspect, its own environment. So that's what's here.
I just wanted to try it. I didn't know what would happen, whether I'd like it or not. And part of doing something like this is to learn a little bit about myself as well. And it feels a little bit like illustrating in some ways, although in the very beginning I didn't want it to be so like that. Yeah, I thought, well, do I take someone's story and just, you know, completely distort it? How much liberty should I have? Especially since I work representationally. I'm not an abstract artist. The imagery has definitely surfaced from talking to Jenny Yankton. She kept repeating this one image that she saw, which is a three-legged coyote who she referred to as her old brother. And she would talk about the coyote coming in the evenings and calling to all the domestic dogs, trying to get the domestic dogs to come and join its pack. And then the rocks stems from another story where Jenny said that she was doing a Sundance and then you know, she fell ill, and when they took her inside, the rocks on the ground started speaking to her, and that image just stuck with me, this idea of the things around us that are organic in some way, you know, how we don't really perceive the subtleties of their life or whatever it might be.
One of the just basic design problems is how to create a sense of unity out of chaos. I've always been fascinated by the almost chaos of wild color. It's like the child with the coloring box wanting to use all the colors instead of just a single color. The primary material that I felt we should use in here was the gold leaf, which is the material which is rather elegant yet tasteful. This kind of reflects back on an old craft process, glass gilding, which is usually associated with the commercial lettering on doors and windows. That process is now obsolete. My first impression of the family is a united family, very humble, yet I think there's a spirituality about them that captured my interest. Adults will over-intellectualize it and try to explain it all away. But if the children, if you can get an oh golly out of the kids, then I think probably they're going to take the time maybe to look beyond it. But I'm hopeful that people will respond to it in terms of, as I've often said, it'll knock your socks off. That's what my goal is in life, is to make a work of art that'll just knock your socks off.
Here we have a conversation with Maida.
And the globe just represents the whole world, and having the rock on top of it kind of puts that, you know, the tension that, you know, if that rock falls, if anything goes bad, the globe breaks, and you know, that it's a kind of it's a serious issue, but I wanted to represent that way.
That's the World's Fair from the 1930s. This is a postcard that I saw from a 1910 postcard for Panama City. Then, of course, the luggage labels on the steamer trunk are different places that I know you said you went to. And this one's actually a poster for Carmen.
You got the hearing part, that's an easy one.
The reverse. Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah, she went to audio. Yeah, she took
Yeah, I made some tortillas the other night. They were horrible, but I made them to print.
And it actually.
But yeah, these are your words. Print on the tortillas.
Estos son lo que usted le dijo.
That's fantastic. She put Shanks's words in here. A letter that he wrote in the 60s. It's wonderful.
That's an odd looking toe.
That's mine.
No. Oh yeah, that is. There. Oh, we got odd looking. We have toes that look like fingers. That's what, you know, one of our main things. And the rest of us are. So, did you feel like it was a couple hundred down?
I've never actually seen put it on there.
That's you. Oh my God, I can't.
Yeah, I could use that too. This is kind of like the doors are just, because I was going, I wonder if you give me one of those extras. So that's kind of weird too. Actually can affect your health in a positive way. I should get that. I'm gonna get that.
But it took a long time before it seemed like it was home.
I wish you were, if you were going to be here, I was going to make sure that you got down.
What Stories of Home has done for me personally is to renew my hope and understanding that art can inspire action and transformation, that somehow art can change our community for the better.
If you look at them closely, you can tell that they have sock-like patterns on them and on the heels and things like that. And that's to give sort of a sense of protection. You see the open space there and you see our feet, and then you have to fill in the rest. But you can't fill it in unless you know what our lives are like. And it speaks to the invisibility of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered community. We're all over, but you don't really see us. We just kind of blend in. And our feet are pretty much, you can't tell, all you can tell is that it's a family.
Straps were bent on it as well, the two ends and then the curls on that.
And I wasn't going to glue anything down, and then I decided no, that it had to be a certain.
If you didn't, they'd be all over the place.
Yeah, and it wouldn't make as much sense.
The yellow represents the color of the skin of the people of Vietnam, and there's 3 stripes, and that represents the 3 different bloods of Vietnam. The 3 main bloods, the North, Central, and South. And we speak the Northern dialect.
They're building new homes. They just got one church up, and they're putting up another church just about.
They left, and they were out at sea for, I think, 6 days.
I don't know, it's pretty long because they ran out of food and they said that
their engine died.
Like everything kept going wrong, and so they thought for sure they were gonna die out there. And then
bullet holes, lots of that. Camouflage, we see that here. Lots of things that are also left to the imagination.
I think it is very symbolic of the African American experience and what African Americans have had to go through in this country. Things have gotten better, some things, but there are still steps that we need to take and things that need to be dealt with before we have true equality in the United States.
It's almost kind of like an oxymoron, because it's like the Supreme Court was saying with all slow speed rather than with all speed, which I think a lot of people read into it when that ruling first came down. So it's a phrase that I struggle with, and when I saw it on that desk, it was something that I responded to.
what is happening right now is that the 12 sculptural pieces are traveling through the community. And these are photographs of the 7 places where our artwork has been. Now, questioning, particularly questioning authority and questioning the status quo, is not anything that's new to Mrs. Shanks, and all of you who know Mrs. Shanks know that. Now, not only did Mrs. Shanks protest when her children were not allowed to attend the school that was closest to their home in 1962 when they lived in Kansas City, Kansas, but she actually went ahead and formed her own home school and educated her own 3 school-age children and 6 other children.
The first thought that came to my mind when I saw the piece was the single word, education. That was my first thought. And then I said to myself, she got it and really understood my story. But then I realized she really understood the story of all African Americans and their struggle to try to get a decent quality education.
Now, I did this sketch in January and knew immediately the direction the piece would go. I knew that the storyteller or the narrator would be the graphite or black desk. I knew that the desks, like all of us, would be inextricably linked one to another. The white desk would be supported by the black desk in such a way as to suggest that the white desk was oblivious of the source of its support. I knew what I was doing, despite people's questions to me, and often the question I get is, oh gee, I thought the big desk would be white. Oh gee, I thought the desk that had a firm footing would be white. And I didn't make a mistake in the paint colors I selected. I knew what I was doing when I made the artwork. Now, what I didn't know, and I've gotten a terrific laugh from Bethina Moore when I told her, I didn't know that what I was creating would cause controversy.
And I thought about how we were arrested and we were actually threatened with being declared unfit parents and threatened with having our children removed from our custody because we taught them at home rather than send them to the overcrowded, understaffed, dilapidated, resegregated elementary school in Kansas City, Kansas.
You guys were flying blind. You were doing the best you could, but there was no guarantee that the decisions you were making were right and that they were going to work out.
That's
and
right.
That's right. It just had to be scary as hell.
It was terrible. Those were very terrifying days, especially when they threatened to take our children away from us. And of course, we received all kinds of death threats and stuff like that. Shanks would check under the hood of the car every morning to be sure there wasn't any bomb under there. Because, you know, blacks could be killed in Kansas City and anywhere else, and nothing would ever be done about it in those days.
We gotta move forward together. We've got to move forward together. We're not going to do it if we don't face it. But telling a story that wasn't my own, and then as I started to prepare for my remarks tonight, I realized, my gosh, it really is my own story. But my story is so painful to tell in terms of being a member of the white majority. And it's certainly the story that's so hard to face today, is how we could, allow discrimination to exist for so long.
Well, you belong to the white majority, but yet you belong to us too. You need to own it. You got it, okay? All right? I don't say that to anybody. You know that.
It's terrifying to have kids around my work because it's really fragile. But at the same time, it's really wonderful to watch them sort of peer around the corners and the edges.
The kids could experience sculpture in reading class. We could read about it, and then also we could read about the various artists, and then we could also write about it. A lot of my students are from various backgrounds, and so it was a very nice outlet for them to share their stories.
It was like the feet going the opposite way of her real feet. What is that supposed to mean?
That's supposed to represent, her husband was gone from her for a long time, so it's supposed to represent his absence and his presence at the same time. You know, when somebody leaves you, your memory is so strong of them that they're with you every day. That's sort of what that's supposed to mean. Those are her husband's feet.
Is her family still alive?
Yep, everybody's
Everybody
alive.
in her family still alive?
Mhm. And they live here in Lincoln.
They do?
Yeah.
What inspiration.
They liked the butterfly, and they thought the butterfly protected the family. You know, I told them it was two separate things, but they thought that it was a nice protection for the family because it was bigger.
They got it. Well, the butterfly was not only hope for Camisa, but it also represented God. It's a tool, it's a reminder tool for her. Every time she sees a butterfly, she is reminded of God's love. It gives her hope because of this understanding that God's looking out for her. So yes, but they got it, right on.
That's good, yeah, okay.
The feedback from the kids, I feel like out of anyone, any audience that's seen it so far that I've interacted with, this audience gets it the most. The questions came from a place where they had already drawn their own conclusions and they were just making sure they were right. So it's been wonderful.
We have named November Homecoming Month here at Westminster Church, and we are featuring various stories of home throughout the month. Of course, we're hosting Zainab Al-Beja's exhibit, but also we handed out some blank templates of houses and asked for members to create their own story of home. And so there have been decorated houses that we're hanging up throughout the church.
I've seen in the halls the work that you all have been doing with telling your stories, and I think that's really wonderful. I think that those of you who have been creating pieces that tell your family stories is a very important experience. And if I were to share the part that has become very important to me out of the experience of working with Zainab and creating this piece, it's the importance of telling your story to other people and of listening empathetically to other people's stories, because it really does, I think, build community and, well, to be simplistic, to make the world a better place. Before working with Stories of Home, I was already using personal stories, but I had not yet taken on somebody else's story, and in fact I had not even imagined doing so, and that was a pretty big leap for me. I found working with Zainab that I was immediately immersed in rich stories from a family and community and a religious tradition very different from my own, and I found myself connecting with a larger community full of vibrant experience.
When the war started at 1 o'clock in the morning, it was very, very loud, and we couldn't wait for the morning day to come so we can leave the house, because we felt the house is going to fall on us at any minute. And we thought, since Basra is close to Kuwait, maybe if we go to Amara, and that's where my uncle lives, my dad's friend, he was with him in the police, And my dad, I remember for 2 hours, he was standing on the highway just to try to get any car, anything with wheels that moves, just to get us from Bosworth to here. And thank God, we found a truck, and we got all on the truck with a lot of other families. And the driver of the truck took us all the way to Amara, and he dropped us there at my uncle's house. Same story. It was very, very heavy bombing in Amara too. And in my uncle's house, it was him, and he has 7 kids. All his kids are married, and they have children. And his mom and his sister was there, so it was like a house of full, maybe 200 people in there. And my parents says, if a bomb falls in this house, it will be really sad. So let's move north to Najaf City. In Najaf City, it's a holy site where we have holy shrines there. And my parents own another home since we've been in war before for 8 years, the Iraq-Iran war. Bosworth.
Focusing on the stories generally, or specific parts of her story as you're putting this together?
Well, I was always preoccupied with the most recent story, and I would usually go back home after I had met with her and start to work on it. But they all compounded. I was very aware of what she told me, and I have to say that it was sometimes emotionally draining. Sometimes I'd feel like a wet dish rag that had to be wrung out. And one day I thought my intern was going to have to mop me up off the floor. They weren't easy, but they were also sources of strength.
If you were doing a project, the whole project, not just yours, over again, would you make any changes?
I'd have to think about that for a few minutes, but I don't think so. It was enormously fulfilling. It was challenging. It was doing something that I like to do. Anything that has to do with textiles, I'll do for hours and miss meals and miss sleep and all kinds of things to work with it. I don't think, right offhand, I can't think of anything I'd change.
So it was very definitely a community building project, and there were many people who said they had an appreciation for fiber art that they never had before after seeing this piece and hearing Rob tell about how he had produced it.
This is my wonderful, beautiful grandmother.
You might ask, what is a tortilla? What is that? It's my salvation. It's my welcome home. Have you ever been out in the cold? Have you ever missed love? Were you ever confused? Did the night look better than your next day? When that cold hits your bones and your tears are all you've tasted in a long while, you go home. You go home to where the warmth of the kitchen is, to where grandma who won't ask any questions lives, to where the tortillas are hot and they taste good just like that, with nothing on them but the love given them by hands, thick with work, thick with kneading, thick with picking asparagus, tomatoes, and cucumbers, with knitting blankets, PJs, and jackets that you use every day, that you wear every night, thick with a life that spans generations.
I went to visit her in her apartment, and I saw this there, and I didn't know that this was the piece of art that had been created. And I was like, what is this, Grandma? What's this doing? This is really neat. And I saw all the stuff, which wasn't too odd because she works with these things to this day. And she told me, oh yeah, these are the palotes, and then that's the box. And she told me what they used to use it for. And I was thinking, is this the box? And I was like, why do you have it now? You know, and then it didn't hit me till later. Wait a second, that's the art piece. So I don't know, it was neat to see a piece of her history kind of brought to life. She raised me some. So I lived with her, even when she was living on her own. I lived with her, and she'd send me off to school, and she'd make my taquitos and stuff, and so it was, I don't know, she filled some shoes, you know?
¿Quieres frijoles, mijo? Do you want beans, son? Sí, Grandma. Ten un poquito de agua. Here, have some water. Gracias, Grandma. Estábamos preocupados. We were worried. I know, Grandma. I know.
I'm glad that they're home. The sculpture, or the whole idea of stories from home is really, really cool. People can express themselves by showing their family. So that was pretty neat. This is me. My name's Deidre Marie Stevens.
It was really hard for Mom to lose me and Chad both at the same time, the only two people that have ever been around for her. I think it represents our personal situation pretty well. I like the broken heart, and the ribbon tied around the two soldiers there represents me and my stepfather Chad being overseas and away from home.
It's been a good experience. I feel I've been a part of it even though I was away. Not only Susan, but other friends and family. Like every time there were stories of home in the newspaper, I got those clippings sent to me in Iraq. So I feel like I was a part of the process just from a distance. It has a lot of meaning to our family, but I hope it can even touch other families that have had to deal with separation.
It just gave me new people to get to know and something else to focus on. I love doing the project for that reason. It did bring my family closer, but it also allowed me to meet a lot of new friends through the Lincoln Arts Council. So.
Looked at the picture of the sculpture. I brought it up here. And she put her hand up here. This is the sculpture of the coyote. She put her hand up here and she smiled and was so happy about it. And she said, "Isn't that face just adorable?" And I knew at that time that this sculpture had, for her, called up the memories of this dear little coyote that she had come to know in the Badlands when she lived in South Dakota. And so she felt very much at ease with it.
So not to get too preciously poetic, but consider this artist Coyote again, forced to be at home in whatever collection or artistic venue in which it is housed. But the real Coyote is a wanderer like me, and if his home isn't wherever he happens to keep his books, it's certainly not one place, some static home. It's where the world takes him.
Art has been taken out of our daily lives. and placed in these buildings that are intimidating to the everyday person because they feel like they don't necessarily know how to talk about it or approach it or look at it. And what the Lincoln Arts Council did is take that away and dissolved those barriers and put art back into people's everyday lives. And that was really cool. And it was an accident what happened. It was by a desk with a rolling chair. But that's the risk, and that's why art's put in safe little hermetically sealed boxes. So I think I would prefer to have my work out where people can see it.
With the idea of making that little opening in her chest and putting the butterfly.
When you see all the stories, all the 12 pieces put together, or you hear the 12 stories together, you start understanding the complexity, that not everything is as simple as we think it is. And you start listening and hearing and actually seeing the complexity of this town or the city. You know, it's almost as if you lift a veil and there's all this kind of realities that are happening and conveying and living with each other.
It has been a long project and it's been a lot of work, but it has been probably one of the most rewarding things I've done in my life that I can think of.
It was incredible. It was moving. You know, every 2 weeks I was having these incredible emotional experiences with people in the community.
It expanded my understanding of being here in Lincoln, which is not what I expected. I thought I would be expanding my understanding of another place, but it expanded my understanding of this place, which is just as valid, I think.
I really think the project for me has been really enlightening. You know, not just in terms of this family, but just in terms of dealing with people. And so as much as this piece is about this family's history, it's I don't know, it's my present.
This is the 21st century. This is, in the art world, there are many accelerations in technology and change, and you wake up every day and the world's changed. One thing that's constant is us people. It's all very noble in human terms, and I think it's really refreshing to bring that back in these times in the art world. And I mean, ultimately, I think in the end, let's hope it's rewarding to those that see it.
Just be interested in the world. And when things are tough, just keep plugging along. Don't give up, or, things do get better.
And I felt Kate we connected from the first time, and we're like sisters. And I love Kate, and thank God that I met Kate. I feel I'm really honored to meet you and meet your family.
And I too.
Thank you. And what a wonderful experience the Art Council gave us, opportunity that my story is now here, It's not all of it, but we have to do all of it. We might have to fit the whole room. Yeah.
Peace, it's when the three aspects of me are in alignment: spiritual, physical, and emotional. And when they are in alignment, I'm able to emanate peace. I'm able to share with other people that feeling. And somehow I always think that peace is contagious.
America is beautiful and freedom and everything good you find, like the flowers. America now is my home. I give this bouquet of flowers to every mother that lost a loved one to protect America.
the closer I get to the end of my life, I realize how it doesn't really matter who you were or how important you thought you were or how much money you had or what class or how much education you had or what gender, I've added that now, you were. But did you love? That's really, I think, all in the final analysis that it will come down to.
Can I get that in writing so I can remember that?
Goodbye.